Today on The State of Us, book ban efforts spread across the U.S. GOP lawmakers push for greater control, transparency over school curriculum, and teachers are quitting and companies are hot to hire them. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only friendly redneck liberal and senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. We've got a full docket of ideas to discuss today, news items that are happening now. Challenges to books about sexual and racial identity are nothing new in American schools, but the tactics and politicization are. Also, bills are seeking broader access to class materials. Many would bar teaching about issues such as critical race theory and penalize violations. And businesses are eager to fill jobs. They're offering former educators better pay and more autonomy. Before we dive into each of these, senior resident historian, educator of 35 years, what is our word of the day?
Word of the day is rapprochement. We're going to try to achieve a little rapprochement today. You say, well, what's that? What are we going to try to achieve on today's show? Well, rapprochement is a three-syllable word spelled rapprochement, and it means establishing or restoring harmony and friendly relations. So we've got some things today that upset people, and we're going to try to bring you all together. Find some common ground.
Not to be confused with reproach, right? R-E-P-R-O-A-C-H. Which is a different word and different meaning. This is
correct.
Rapprochement.
Rapprochement.
Reproche.
Yes, because it's P-R-O-C-H-E and it's French, so that's an S-H. Rapprochement.
Yes. Rapprochement. So the first thing up, and we're basically going to take it segment by segment here, Lance. So we're going to look at book ban, followed by lawmakers pushing for greater control and transparency over school curriculums and teachers quitting and moving to other industries. Okay.
I'll try to make it through all three episodes.
All three episodes. Okay.
I know you don't like that. It's segments. I got it. I just do that, folks, just to to rankle his skin a little bit.
From the New York Times, parents, activists, school board officials, and lawmakers around the country are challenging books at a pace not seen in decades. The American Library Association said in a preliminary report that it received a, quote, unprecedented 330 reports of book challenges, each of which can include multiple books from last fall. So it's quite the phenomenon, a lot going on. Among the most frequent targets are books about race, gender, sexuality, like All Boys Aren't Blue, Lawn Boy, Gender Queer, and The Bluest Eye. But titles even also include some familiar classics like To Kill a Mockingbird, The Handmaid's Tale, A People's History of the United States, and others. So quite the diverse range of books that are being targeted here. And Lance, tell us about, because they use a specific example, right, of a school district where this was brought to a school board meeting and parents and students showed up and some interesting stuff took place, did it not?
What's interesting, this was in a school district in the state of Florida, and they were looking at a book, All Boys Aren't Blue, and where at the meeting, a group of students protested the ban of the book and distributed free copies of the book. Okay, so that's what the students did. The students said, we want to keep this book in our library, and for those of you who are against it or who would like to read it and have not, here are free copies of the book. We would like for you to read it, and so you can see what it is that is causing all the problems and whether or not you think it is causing problems. Whereas the adults, the counter-protesters, assailed the book as pornography and occasionally screamed obscenities and anti-gay slurs at the students. So the kids said, well, here's the book. Here's a free copy. Why don't you read it and see how you think about what you think about it after you read it? The adults at the debate screamed obscenities at the students and yelled anti-gay slurs at the students. Just ask you a simple question. Who were the adults in the room?
So, book bans, yay or nay? Well, if you've listened to the show long enough, or maybe not long at all, I think you would know that Lance and I both read quite a bit. And Lance's personal library is more extensive than mine, but mine continues to grow.
I'm a lot older than you.
Right.
I've been collecting for a lot longer than you have.
Got the advantage in years on the collection. But so we're both avid readers, I think is a fair synopsis. You can probably guess where most avid readers fall on this.
Well, and to be honest, there's stuff that I've read that I've not enjoyed. But
sure. Who likes everything that they read?
And I'm not against debate. Okay. From the previous example there, I wasn't saying anything about not being able to debate the validity of a book and whether or not it should be taught or open. Have a debate. But you're going to say, well, I don't like it. When the other group says, well, yeah, but we like it and we'd like for you to read it. And you're going to go to that level of calling them names and using curse words in front of students. I mean, come on now. Let's have an adult debate with this. What does that solve? And aren't we as adults supposed to mimic what we want our young people to see? Why can't we have an open debate? You and I don't have to agree on what books should be banned or banned at all or never banned, but can we do it in an adult manner so that we can show our children that we can exist and coexist and work for the common good?
Can we have honest, open, and respectful conversations?
That's all I'm asking, and that's what I meant by that. I wasn't trying to say that the people who were wanting to ban the book were necessarily bad people because they wanted to ban the book. I'm saying they didn't argue their reasons as to why they wanted to ban the book. They just attacked the people who were handing out free copies of the book who happened to be children. I mean, come on, set the example if you're the adults. Have the normal, common conversation that we need to have on these hot-blooded issues, not just retort to calling kids names. Really?
If it boils down to you wanting control over what your child has access to, and here's where we get to the cruel reality of most of these things is that people don't understand that, generally speaking, there's measures already in place to allow you a degree of control. So two things I want to point out here. Those who are demanding certain books be removed insist that is an issue of parental rights and choice, that all parents should be free to direct the upbringing of their own children.
Yes.
And exactly. My response is, yes, you have that right. And nothing about the books that are available prevents you from exercising that right. Because last I checked, Lance, there's nothing that's forcing your child to go to that school and pick up that book. If you don't want them to pick up the book, and the article points this out too, Lance, many school libraries already have mechanisms in place to stop individual students from checking out books of which their parents disapprove. So many schools already offer that option. And if your school doesn't offer that option, or if that option, in your opinion, doesn't go far enough, you always have the option of taking your kid out of that school. You may homeschool them. You may send them to a private school. You may send them to another public school. You have that freedom. You have that right. So this, I guess to me, it's kind of it's a moot point of why are we debating this? Well, because I want the school that my kid already goes to do everything the way that I want them to do it. Well, you don't have that right.
Because now you're infringing on the rights of other students.
Exactly. And that's to me where it comes down to. This is a case of individual rights. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. What I disagree with is the extension of, as we've talked about before, your right to direct the upbringing of your child does not give you the right to affect the upbringing of other children. And if you don't like the way that some place is doing it, you're allowed to change, but you don't get to change the system to fit what you want. You change and move them to a system that meets what you already want. And I think that's where the confusion comes in, is somebody believing they have the right to change the system for everybody so that it fits what they want.
And the school system has your child for 6 to 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. You have them the rest of the time.
Right.
Who has the ability to make a larger impact on a child's life? Why are you turning it over to the schools in the first place?
Well, and I think it goes back to that whole situation as well, right? Of the harder that you resist something, and this isn't just with children, this is just people, right? The more you tell somebody not to do a thing, the more likely they are to do it. And this has always just irked me with people who are trying to convince others of their point, right? And I mean, I'll readily admit that I am guilty of this sometimes, and I have to take a breath and remind myself that berating people, right? Calling people names, taking away things that other people want, rarely delivers a lasting end result in your favor. It almost certainly polarizes the opposition and digs them in. All those children still have all those questions. They're still going to find the book. And as we pointed out, in the dawn and the age of media, right, online media, I gave Lance the example of what's to stop them from going online and reading excerpts of the book or buying the book outright and reading it without somebody else's consent. Well, I'll take their phone away. Well, what happens when they see a friend? Well, I won't let them see friends. Well, what happens if they go to the library and get on the internet? Well, I won't let them. Okay, so just to be clear, the only thing that's going to be left is you're going to lock your child in their room alone and never allow them access to anything other than what you tell them.
Well, an example of that is I had a former student who was raising their children, their right, and they said they didn't want them to read the Harry Potter books. Okay, well, they weren't being read at school anyway, but they just said, not allowed to read the Harry Potter books. I watched all 5 of her children come through school, and they borrowed the Harry Potter books from their friends and read them at lunchtime at school and kept them in their lockers and never took them home. And she believes she was doing a wonderful job as a mother, and all 5 of her children read the entire Harry Potter series while they were in middle school.
You mean that children sneak things behind their parents' back?
Can you believe it?
I can't. I can't believe it.
Not in middle school.
No.
That would never happen.
Never would a middle school student do that. Never, if my parent had said, don't do X, would I attempt to do it.
No way.
That'd be crazy. Well, speaking of books and knowing what's going on in schools, lawmakers are pushing for greater control and transparency over school curriculums. What exactly is happening there? Well, let us know first your thoughts on book bans. Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Because hearing your thoughts, Lance, right? That's how we practice rapprochement. And that is bringing us together, harmony, friendly relations, which are, believe it or not, what we would like here. So let's talk about transparency over school curriculums to find out what that involves and how broad it is. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Lawmakers in at least a dozen states, Lance, are backing bills meant to increase transparency around school curriculums. School curricula. The next iteration of movements underway to bar teachers from promoting concepts perceived as divisive. The bills introduced by Republican legislators would, in some states, allow taxpayers to sit in on classes or make professional development sessions open to members of the public.
Please come in and sit in my last professional development. Oh boy. Bring your pillow. All right.
Some of the bills.
But no, I mean, I understand it's public education, right? I mean, I'm not against parents knowing what's being taught, but I would also hope that they would respect my professional judgment, that I've been to college and multiple hours of training since and within the school and outside of the school to do my job.
Never mind the years of experience.
I would never think that I would come in to their office and tell them how to do their job. because they're the experts. They know what to do. They know whether they're working with an office system or in a factory or, I wouldn't come in and say, oh, you're a delivery driver? Well, you ought to do your route this way because, I've never done it, but I think this is the best way and the fastest way and the most efficient way to deliver your packages throughout the day. I would never think of being so presumptuous.
Well, a common retort might be that obviously the effect on the development of youth merits a certain oversight, although the response ought to be, right? That's why we have school administration and a school board who is elected by the public. Because I think there's also a reasonable assumption that a parent may not have the time to sit in on each of their child's classes and their teacher's professional development sessions. And that's why we elect a board of publicly elected representatives to oversee how everything is going. And the key there is to oversee, right? Not to stand next to every day, all day, and make sure you do it exactly the way I want. Because again, frankly, and not to be rude, but if you have time to do that, then why is your child in public school in the first place? And I don't mean they should be in private school. I'm saying, why don't you just homeschool them? Why cause the consternation in your own life? Forget about the teacher and the other children. I mean, who cares about them? Selflessness is dead. So, forget about that and the consternation it causes them. What about the consternation it causes you to go in and fight this battle and try to get everybody to do it your way, knowing that they don't even believe what you believe? So you're having to force them into something they don't want to do, which means they're not going to do it the way you want because they don't want to do it that way. So who exactly wins here? You waste a ton of time. They're not happy about doing it, which means they don't do it justice the way that you want it done. So really, why not just, again, to the last segment, you have the right. Why not just pull them out and do it yourself?
Well, this is another anecdotal piece, but I remember, back in the days when you got report cards 4 times a year, right? I mean, I started teaching. That's what happened. Then we went, now you figured grades by hand. Now we do it with a computer. And because of the computer, they decided, the board, as you pointed out in administration, said, we are now going to allow parents to access their child's grade 24/7.
Transparency has never been greater.
So transparency was there, right? Well, my wife, who is still teaching in the same school district I've retired from, but she is now being required to contact all parents through email of students who are currently not passing her class, even though the parents have 24/7 access to her grade book. And the parent's response is, well, I don't have time to look at it. So you need to send me an email to tell me that my student. Now, wait a minute. The point of the article, one of the teachers interviewed said, all you're doing is putting another layer of work on the teacher that is not allowing them to prepare for class to better teach the student. You can call up my grade book or my, in this case, my wife's grade book anytime you want from any device. So if, they take a test, as soon as she enters the grade, you can see that. If they did homework that day, she grades it, puts it on. You have 24/7 access to the grade book. Yet you still are demanding the school board to tell the teachers to send a personal email to me because I don't have time to check the grade book, but I will look at an email from the teacher telling me that my student is not passing the class.
And you have access to all the teachers' emails, right?
Right.
Like you can email them.
You can email, because they publish that. You can email the teachers directly if you have a question.
It seems transparency has literally never been greater,
right,
than it is right now.
And yet we're putting more requirement on the people that we say should be educating our students.
Which takes time away from the students, right?
Right.
Well, because, it doesn't take that much time away. But, how many students did you have on an average year, Lance? How many individual students?
Well, I average between 120 and 150 students a year.
Okay. So low end, 120. So on the low side, in addition to the 120 students, 120 parents, right?
Yeah, at least.
I mean, at least, but realistically, 240.
Closer to 500.
Right.
Because you have parents, stepmoms, step-parents, grandmas, grandpas, who are all in charge of
But I mean, on the
children.
lowest end, you've doubled.
Yeah.
You've doubled the potential communication demand that you need to reply to on the low end. If every parent sent one email, that is 120
emails that I would have to answer
right
on a given day.
When will you do that in your 8-period day?
Well, out of my 8-period day, I teach 6 of them. I have 1 period, 40-minute period, to plan my lesson for the day and get my grading done.
So that's 7 periods.
And the other one is my lunch period.
Okay. So
I have to take away either my lunch or my planning period, or do what most teachers do, and that is get to school an hour before the students get there, or stay an hour or 2 afterwards, or pack up my stuff and go home to my family and cook them dinner and help them with their homework, and then sit down at 9 or 10 o'clock and start answering emails.
So realistically speaking, I mean, just try to make sure I understand the basic math here. If you received, and this is just one time, we're not even talking about multiplying it. One time, if they each sent you an email and you needed 60 seconds to respond to each email, which, by the way, I don't think is even close to realistic, that's an additional 120 minutes, 2 hours of time, to which we just identified doesn't exist anywhere in the current school day that you're paid for. So even under the current system, the current level of transparency is not a sustainable model, let alone adding additional transparency. Because, for example, let's play out the parent sits in on the class. Well, hopefully the assumption is that the parent is not going to actively question the lesson as it's being given. Quite the assumption, because I'm sure that there would be plenty that would be happy to engage with the teacher in real live debate in real time, which would totally derail the class and the lesson. But setting that aside, if they waited until the end, is the assumption that they're just observing? Because I find it really hard to believe that they're just going to sit there, listen quietly, and then pack up and leave at the end and not stay and want to talk to the teacher.
Well, there's 4 minutes of passing time. And so if they stay and talk to the teacher, there are lots of instructions that are given as students are leaving my classroom after the bell has rung. And there are instructions I'm trying to give to students who are entering my classroom so that they can prepare for the lesson as soon as the bell rings to start class. So now, even if I talk to the parents for a couple of minutes between periods, 1, it's not a very long discussion, and 2, it's taking away from my time with my students to help them to be productive and achieve the goals that the parents and I both want for their child.
Sounds like another idea that was not 100% thought through. Or if it was thought through, there were some key points that were missed. And again, I want to be clear that I'm right there with Lance and thinking that I absolutely think that parents should be involved in their child's education. Absolutely. And I think part of the problem is that not enough parents are involved in their child's education. They don't know what their child's doing, and they by default take their child's side before even knowing what the school's position is. Happens literally all the time. I mean, witness it on a weekly basis, it happening. So that aside, right, I think that they ought to be involved. But I do think, as is pointed out in the article, there's a limit to that involvement. And standing over another professional's shoulder and judging every decision they're making on a day-to-day basis is not a conducive way to educate students. And I think it will actively harm the education of students because of just the very basic scenario that we outlined there of the sheer amount of time that would be required to service. Because again, you say, well, but not every parent's going to do that. Okay, but if they wanted to do that, we have to be able to provide it. I mean, legally, right? How is it fair that if every parent wanted to do it, I don't address every parent? That's not fair, right? I mean, that's wrong.
You shouldn't be allowed to pick and choose which parents you're going to
That's not okay.
interact with and which ones you're
if
not.
If all the parents say we want it, well, they're not all going to do that. Only I'm going to do that. Oh, well, but we can't build a system based on that principle, you know?
But my room only holds 30 people. And if I have 30 students.
Right. Now we got 60 people.
Now I have 30 parents who I don't have room. And if you want to be legal about it, I'm breaking the fire code. Because the fire marshal
endangering.
Says I can't have that many people in my space because it's overcrowding.
So a number of issues there. Let us know your thoughts, though. Again, send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. Podcast@thestateofus.org. We'd like to hear what you think. Last, but certainly not least, and it's kind of the culmination of this stuff that we're discussing, teachers are quitting and companies are hot to hire them. Why might that be? Why are they quitting? I don't know. And why would companies be eager to hire teachers? Let's find out. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Businesses eager to fill jobs are offering former educators better pay and more autonomy. Teachers started leaving classrooms in 2020, according to the Wall Street Journal, when the pandemic upended education and childcare. And the number of resignations from the private education sector hit nearly 550,000 between January and November, federal data shows. More than 800,000 resignations were handed in during the same period by people in state and local education. Now, everybody on this show knows that I am not the strongest person at math, but I'm pretty sure, Lance, that comes out to 1.35 million resignations from the classroom in 2020 from January through November.
That's quite a number.
Okay. Quits in educational services sector rose 148% in that time frame, while quits in states and local education rose 40%, according to federal data. By comparison, quits in retail trade rose just 27% during the same time. And according to LinkedIn, the share of teachers on the site who left for a new career increased 62% last year. The potential for career and pay growth, some roles are paying tens of thousands of dollars above typical teacher salaries, is alluring amid a long stretch of Zoom learning and pandemic-stressed classrooms, former teachers say. And might we add, book bans and additional transparency and oversight requirements for teachers.
All true. I mean,
why be a teacher?
Well, because not most, but there are many of my coworkers. It felt like it was a calling. We were there and we love working with young people and opening minds and seeing students learn things, that proverbial light bulb going off. It's like, oh, I get it. Now I know how I see the intricacies of how math works. And, oh, so this is how the cell reproduces. And, oh, wow, it leads to these beautiful animals and plants. Or, I never thought of it that way before. That's an interesting thought that this author just brought up. And it's fun to see when everything clicks and to lead them along that path to discovery. It's a wonderful time. But when you are faced with all of these pressures coming down and people constantly looking over your shoulder, why would you continue to do that? Even if it's a profession that you love and enjoy. Well, people have said, And other workplaces say, oh, we'd love to have you. Why? Oh, well, you're a problem solver. You're a taskmaster. You have the ability to juggle many different things throughout the day, as teachers do. All right. Our students walk in. We don't know what we're getting that day. We don't know what they've had happen to them over the weekend or in the evening or what's happening in their home. And we have to juggle. We have to move and change on the fly. We might have one lesson planned and something occurs and we need to do something totally different. And we have those capabilities. And that's in the business world, those things are talents and skills that they're looking for and they're willing to pay for. And then this one I just laughed at, but we have one said, for some teachers, just the simple ability to eat lunch or go to the bathroom at a time of their choosing has been an enormous plus in their life. Because I don't think people realize that. If you have 25, 30 kids in your classroom,
you can't just get up.
You just can't get up and go to the bathroom because you have to go. You can't just, well, I'm hungry, so I'm going to go have lunch now. No, you have, your students until 12:30. So if you get hungry at 11:30, too bad. You have students, you have responsibilities until 12:30. So your life is controlled. Your restroom breaks are controlled by the time that you have students. And I will throw this one in that they don't talk about. I would have my friends in the business world say, hey, why don't you go to the game with us on Wednesday? And I said, well, I can't. I have to teach. Well, just take the day off. I can't. That's a fireable offense by law. As a public employee, I cannot take a day off from work for entertainment. And they go, well, we can in the business world. Right. You can. I can't. There are lots of things that people who work outside of the school system take for granted, like using the bathroom, taking days off, eating lunch when they want, that are not available to school teachers. And so you offer those things and you offer more money and you offer them the freedom to set their own work schedule, and you don't care when the work's done. I mean, you want it done by a deadline, but you don't care how they get it done or when they get it done. And you're going to pay them more money and they have more freedom and more autonomy.
Sounds like everything's better about not being a teacher. But part of the way that we build understanding, part of the way that hopefully we build rapprochement, right, is through understanding. We have to understand what's going on if we expect harmony and friendly relations. And the only way to do that is to ask teachers what's going on. And again, to Lance's point, those things like going to the bathroom on your schedule or eating lunch on your own schedule, easy to take for granted when you work in a job where that's how it's always been. But not everybody works in that job. And I think the other thing is the emotionally taxing component, which probably is the number one thing, because one of the individuals in the article, Nicole Rutan, who taught middle school science for 13 years in Louisville, Kentucky until December, she said, quote, "The people I interact with on a day-to-day basis are happy." She quit teaching and is now a corporate trainer at a financial services company where she trains employees in areas such as improving customer interactions. The company, the other thing there is we say train, we could also say teaches employees in areas such as improving customer interactions. The company lets her work from home unless she is doing an on-site training. Miss Rutan, 39, says she took a pay cut to leave the classroom, so she actually is getting paid less. She misses laughing with her students, but she says she is happier in an environment where problems are treated as solvable and coworkers are open to new ideas. Quote, "It felt like a sinking ship," she said. "Nothing is changing and everything is a problem. It's a hard state to live in all the time."
I mean, it's, you really...
You can relate to that.
I can. I mean, but for me, that's what kept me going. I liked that. I like to accept challenges that no one else will. I enjoyed those students, and I was the one who got them most of the time because I was willing to. Those students that say, "Oh, I can't teach them anything." Well, they're incorrigible. Well, they're, and I'm like, "Oh, give them to me. I'm all right." And they're like, "Well, how did you do that?" It's like, well, honest,
but it takes a lot to do that.
Honest,
does
open
it not?
opinion, right? It wears you down. I was just talking to my daughter last night, and she is worn out, and it's only February, and she is a middle school, high school teacher, and she said, "Dad, I sometimes question whether or not I'm doing a good job because there's just so many different people coming at me from so many different directions." And you do feel that way. And you do need to take time to replenish yourself. And at this time of the school year, that is nowhere to be found. You just have to keep going along. And if it weren't for your students and it weren't for their successes and then coming to talk to you and sharing with you and helping them solve problems and helping them carve their career paths. If you're not able to do those things and see those things, it is very difficult to stay the path and keep going. Or if you're working with younger kids, to see that they understand how to add and subtract and multiply and divide, or they unlock the key to reading, and you make those goals with it. That's where you gain your energy. And then going to these professional development meetings and these staff meetings and doing all the drudgery work that is teaching, that's what takes all the life and fun out of being in the classroom.
I think a good way to sum up our goal today is that we ultimately wanted to provide rapprochement, right? Restoring and establishing that sense of friendly relations and harmony. It's a tough one because Lance and I think both feel strongly about these topics for different reasons and some of the same reasons. So our opinions were
not everybody had a
more
good
solid today.
I mean, not everybody had a good experience when they were in school. I was one of those people. I became a teacher because I felt like teachers didn't care about me. So I worked really hard to work with all my students to make sure they all knew. And I didn't always do it, but that was my goal. Because, I understand that as adults, some of us didn't like school or didn't care for teachers, but you have to understand, I think we need to work, you talk about rapprochement, we have to work from the agreement that teachers want the same things for your student as you do. They're there and they're sacrificing because they want your children to be successful. And I think that's what parents want, right? Parents want their children to be successful. So instead of making each other out to be enemies and working against one another, we need to establish that rapport so that we're working together to achieve the common goal we have, and that is the learning of all students.
And that's similar to a goal here on the State of Us, right, Lance?
It is.
What is our mission?
Well, here at True Chat, our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully today you've enjoyed it. And if there's some things that you take umbrage with, please let us know. Send us an email at podcast@thestateofus.org because we're glad to read that because that's part of the conversation. If we've said something that you don't agree with or you question, share that with us so we can address it on a future show. We'd love that. And as you're talking to your classmates, right, your workmates or your family, and you talk about the show and they say, well, we'd like to listen to that show. Where can we find it? Well, as a podcast, we're on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and anywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning as a podcast. We're also heard on radio stations across the country on the weekends. I think Justin takes a decisive victory today.
We're going to mention it today because Justin won. And I'm not going to argue.
That's right.
Justin did win.
Okay.
I'm just arguing that on the days that Justin doesn't win, we don't get the final score.
Oh,
we always throw it to Bradley to figure out who won.
Right. Well, Bradley doesn't have to figure it out today because the answer is clear. The victor is obvious.
I'm not going to argue that you didn't.
Okay.
You're like, well, I don't know.
I'd like to point out it's a 3-syllable word as well. I think that I don't know. This may be the first victory with a word that's over 2 syllables.
Well, and it's also a word that you got to pick because you had some questions about words and I looked them up in my handy dandy dictionary and you said that would be a good word of the day.
So when I'm prepared, I can win.
You do a lot better job when you're prepared.
Okay.
Yes. I'm the one who works well without preparation.
For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to clearly of the three of us, the person who is, or attempts to be at least, the very most prepared and organized individual. And that would be none other than our producer, Mr. Bradley Butch. Thank you, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.